I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, so I'll answer quickly. This bill limits $500,000. That's the cap, period, the end. What I'm trying to communicate to Ms. Baker is that I am open to having the dialogue about a formula where the UC can propose, where they fund, where they choose or offer to fund an employee greater amounts, and we can have that conversation, and I'm open to an amendment there as long as the stakeholder, the sponsor of the bill, is comfortable, because I'm working as a team with AFSCME on this piece of legislation. We believe on this issue, we're on the same page. So I'm open to that dialogue. We'd like to hear a proposal as to how they do that. We also like to hear how they're not doing it today, or how they're making it work today, because this legislature is not getting clear and transparent information, and it's unfair when we're putting up the people's money on the table in a significant amount. I would argue and say this as fact. There is not one contributor to the UC system that is bigger than the general fund resources coming out of the California taxpayers' pocketbook. There's not one greater. They'll point to 25% if that's all you are, but point to the one that's bigger than California. So because we are the biggest funder, we deserve to know where our money is coming. There's not one individual that does more.
Mr. Williams.
Mr. Hernandez, that's not correct. Fees from students is a larger portion.
Students are the people of California.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, that's not
Are they
tax
not?
dollars. There's a difference.
There isn't a difference. There is not a difference. Right. These are funds. They're public funds. Those fees. We have a student here, and I was a former UC student myself.
And
those are dollars of the taxpayers.
That's very important, because while I think that it is laudable that you shed and the 3299 sheds scrutiny on the UC, because I do think there are people who are overpaid. When you say things like that, and you leave the impression that we're giving the UC a lot of money, and the reality is we are giving the UC less and less money over time, even though we've had these 4% and 5% increases the last few years. That is after tremendous cuts that you and I both voted for, right? Yeah, because we had to stem the bleeding. But we have the responsibility to provide students and the state of California a future for higher education. The only thing I don't like about this bill is it provides the misimpression that if we actually capped this salary, we would be able to avoid tuition increases without giving any more money. The reality is you're not going to get $80 million out of this. You're just not. There's no easy path here. If we don't want tuition increases, we need to provide more money to the UC and CSU. We have restored K-12 funding. We have restored community college funding. We have gone nowhere near restoring UC and CSU funding. And the problems that creates is that we are dispensing with an obligation in the Education Master Plan to educate the top third of the students of the state. The CSU that no one's raising a stink about, the CSU is instead of raising fees, is just cutting 30,000 slots. What use is affordability when you just don't even have a seat, right? So this is, I'm prepared to support this, particularly if you are committing to an amendment to clarify that this is about the capping the salary derived from taxpayer-derived sources. I'm okay with that. But you should not leave the impression that this is going to solve the problem. It's not. That $80 million, it's not true. And especially if the majority of the ones who are capped are from non-general fund-derived sources. And so and to give more evidence that there's still some use in going through this exercise, I will remind the committee and those that might be against the bill that that it's 3299 who did first shed light on the fact that some UC campuses had such a high level of middle management that the ratio was astronomical. And because of that, the UC did take steps and reduced that, and now you have less people in middle management. So there is a function to having this discussion. I just don't want you guys to leave the impression that we can then get by without giving the UC a $100 million increase, because that's the only way we are going to keep on enrolling more students without cutting slots or raising tuition.
Mr. Linder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the author. I'm preparing to support the bill, but I'm also want to just let you know that may change when it comes down to future votes, because I think that the statements that have been made here on this floor are really important to me. I'm going to support it, though, because I do think that we need to send this message that transparency is important, and I think that for me, it boils down to the students and making sure that the students are getting the highest attainable quality of education that's possible, and that's where the concern comes in too, because I want to make sure that level that we're expecting as far as the level of education that our students are receiving needs to remain high. We need to expect that we're setting the bar really, really high, and if we're cutting courses that have to do with medicine or something else that where it might affect that quality of education, I think that's where we will have a problem. So I want to just kind of make sure that you are thinking about these amendments that are being presented right here. Also, I think that there might need to be some sort of exclusion as far as revenue builders for the system too. I mean, I know that the sports programs are separately funded, but when it comes down to an employee that might be paid that's actually serving in a function that brings in more revenue to the system, I think that's something that might need some sort of exception, because if you're not getting the best quality employee in a position like that, then it actually is doing a disservice, because that we are indeed losing revenue in that situation. So those are a couple things that I'd like you to consider, but consider me a supporter for this committee.
Thank you.
Mr. John Sawyer.
And Mr. Hernandez, I struggle with this, and I'm just going to, quickly as I can, let you know how I went from a no to a yes. When I look at capping these salaries, I have a daughter that wants to go into education. She wants to be superintendent of school. Her grandmother, who'd been an educator for 60 years, told her not to do that. You need to go into higher ed. You need to go private sector, where you'll be university president at Swarthmore and make $7 million in benefits and things of that nature. My daughter wanted to go into public service, so she stayed as a LA Unified school teacher because she wants to work her way up and stay in public service. I worked in public service for 25 years in real estate. I sold a $212 million building. If I was in the private sector, I would have walked away at the low end, $4.2 million, at the high end, $10.6 million, and I would not be sitting here right now. But I chose public service like many of us around here. And I'm concerned about the privatization of the UC, CSU, and the community college systems. That we're looking at money as the number one factor in how we move forward. The fact that there's a very small group of individuals that make decisions on the budget that are making over $500,000 that may be more connected to the state budget than they are with anything else. They're the ones that I'm really concerned with, and how do you change that behavior? You have individuals right now who are very similar to what I'm dealing with the judiciary. There's a small group of individuals in the AOC who make more than the governor, but they make 100% of the budget decisions that go on. And we find that a lot of those decisions were not in the best interest of the people and people who have access to justice. But more important, they weren't looking at how to do efficiencies in a way where they didn't need all the money that they claimed to need, which is like $1.2 billion. They probably needed a whole lot less if they were a little more efficient, but they didn't care. In some cases, they didn't care about how to do that in an efficient manner. Right now, you have this game we're going with the UCs with the people who are making this kind of capital, where out-of-state students are the premium. We're going out-of-state students who can pay a premium are more important than the students here. If I were them, if they wanted to really be a business enterprise, I would not have said we're going to cap out-of-state students who can pay a whole lot of money at $2,000 and keep the in-state students at $1,000. I would have made a great deal. Would have been the money that we would have made off of that would have brought that number up to $2,000, and it would have had you, me, and everybody in the Assembly and the Senate jumping up and down. But instead, we're playing these pawn games with people who make this kind of salary on the tuition, on the employees within the system, tuition hikes going back as a pawn between this body and the UC, and they, just like the judiciary, say, almost act like we're the third branch of government and the Assembly and others can't tell us. Well, one way we can actually impact this is through the budget. So I applaud you for coming at it through the pocketbook, because that is, a lot of ways, the only way you can make people perk up. And then like the last thing, what really bothered me is when, and I'm not trying to put UCLA on blast right now, because obviously, as I told my colleague from UCLA, I would love to make sure UCLA football coach only made $100,000 a year. Then he would only be able to get a high school coach to coach them, but that's a whole nother discussion. But the number of African American students that are being admitted right now into the UCs is abysmal. And I don't feel there's right now that there's a real concerted effort to do that. Yes, the UCs spend $20 million a year to get minority students into the system. They spend another $5 million to go international, but they're more successful with the $5 million than they are with the $20 million. That's management. Those are the people that are making all this, the people who make these decisions, and are not doing things I think are in the best interest. And so I think this effort you're doing now at looking at the perks, compensations, retirement, housing, employer-paid compensations will probably shed a light, because I call this kind of Marie Antoinette kind of analogy, where people at the top who make the decision kind of have this attitude of let them eat cake and hope that they ultimately will get what they want. Whether or not they need $100 million or any, before we give the UCs any money, we need to make sure that they're using the money properly to do what the people of California really want done. And so I'm one of those that are very cautious, sitting on budget committee, about how we move forward from this day forward. And so I applaud you on this. I was a little skeptical, because I still am unsure whether or not they will get the message, and whether or not the UCs will wake up and understand that the Assembly and the Senate and the governor are very serious about ensuring that everyone has access to an education here in California. And that should be the number one thing that we should be doing, not talking about compensations, deferred payment, houses, drivers, and mansions in different places. That's the private sector, where I came from, private sector college. That is not really a public sector college. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Harper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This issue is very timely. Just over the weekend, I read an article in the New York Times regarding the subject, and the article was entitled "The Real Reason College Tuition Costs So Much" by Paul Campos. It was just published over the weekend. And he wrote, "A major factor driving the increasing costs and the constant expansion of university administration. According to the Department of Education data, administrative positions at colleges and universities grew by 60% between 1993 and 2009, which Bloomberg reported was 10 times the rate of the growth of tenured faculty positions. Even more strikingly, an analysis by a professor at Cal Poly Pomona found that while a total number of full-time faculty members in the CSU system grew from 11,614 to 12,019 between 1975 all the way to 2008, the total number of administrators grew from 3,800 to 12,183, a 221% increase. And so I thank you very much for bringing this issue forward, because it is very important that we have a very difficult conversation about how the University of California and the Cal States and our public university and college system grows back after the difficult times that we've had over the last few years, because we're really asking, how do we see our educational institutions, our public educational institutions in this state? And more importantly, is one of the issues that was brought up was, yeah, we have to deal with the market system of, to be able to compete for top administrators. I understand that. But the other side is that our systems are so large in the state of California that we are a significant driver in terms of that market. And so with that, I don't think that this may be a perfect solution, but I'm very much for driving this conversation forward, and I'll be supporting this legislation.
Thank you.
Ms. Irwin?
Thank you, and I will be probably repeating some of the statements of my colleagues. I certainly understand the frustrations of the students and of us, where you have tuition rates going up at the same time that you have these skyrocketing executive compensation packages, and I think UC has to take a look at its salaries and make sure they do the salary surveys and that these salaries are justifiable. Right now there's an effort looking at the entire UC system and the costs and trying to find efficiencies, and I think that that's very, very important. I'm supporting this bill because I think we need more transparency. The UC needs to be more transparent. We need to have a really good idea about those top salaries. Where is that money coming from? Is there really any savings to be had to limit these caps? I am not in support of an arbitrary hard cap for executive compensation. I think those arbitrary hard caps tend to have unintended consequences, and the last thing that we want to do is adversely affect the UC system, the Cal State system in this state. It is driving these systems are driving the California economy. So I will support this effort right now, but I think as we move forward, we really have to refine what we do at the very end. I think it's a great discussion to have, but a hard cap I don't think is the way to get us there.
Thank you.
Mr. Bloom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If this bill was about transparency, I'd be happy to support it, but I think that's really only a small part of what the bill seeks to address, and the real underlying issue here is the bill the part of the bill that seeks to cap salaries. And as my colleague from Ventura County just said, that I agree that's not something I can support either. But I don't feel that I can vote for the bill because I don't see another direction that the author or that this bill is really willing to take on this issue. And I haven't heard in the discussion, and I want to thank my colleague from Huntington Beach for raising the issues that were in the article. But if we want to have an honest discussion about the potential solutions to this issue, then that's what the bill should call for. The bill should call for a discussion, for an independent panel perhaps to look at UC salaries and what appears to be a dramatic increase over time in administrative salaries, and what best practices might we be able to implement in order to stem those salaries from increasing. But that doesn't seem to me to be where the dialogue is heading here. This is what I'm hearing is language of confrontation and not solution, and I really think that if this is an issue that even has a solution, we ought to be trying to define what those solutions are, seek them out, and work on them. Thank you.
Ms. Weber?
Yes, I want to apologize. First, I had to leave to have a meeting with someone who came to my office that promised to meet with concerning the budget. But let me just say that, this is a very difficult issue. I've dealt with this issue probably for 40 years at the university with regards to examination of compensation and faculty versus administrators versus others. And oftentimes, it appears as it's an issue, really an issue of moral statement, much more than anything else. Because, and I'm concerned that that CSU was not put into this box as well, because they're not always the best actors either when it comes to salary compensations. And we've been in situations where everyone we were in dire straits, and CSU's hired presidents with 2 times more salaries than the past president. So it's not that the UC is so out of control. All of them are pretty much doing their own thing without a thought for the moral statement or the statement that's being made to a group of employees at a time when you are in a difficult challenge, and all of a sudden a person gets a 50% or 100% increase in salary of a new president that's coming in. Now, I realize that additional $200,000 that person got by no means would solve the problem in the state of California. It is really a statement about being a part of a team that at that point is struggling, and a good administrator would not take that salary. I've said that to SDSU president when he got the additional $200,000. Your $200,000 will not solve our problems, but it's a matter of you being a good leader and a good administrator, and basically taking one for the team so that you understand what it's all about. So I'm probably going to support this today, even though I don't think this is going to solve our problem, but I think the conversation needs to continue. I doubt seriously if there's $80 million in money floating around, because I know that this UC and the CSU have multiple ways in which they fund these institutions. I do believe that we're going to get to some better issues and hopefully solutions through the supposedly zero-based budgeting that's occurring with the University of California. We've begun to look at the numbers and see where they are and try to develop some sense of transparency. I think this will send a message to should send a message to the University of California that the legislature wants more information concerning the funding. And it may be very true, and I think it probably is, that most of the new high salaries we see are in the medical schools that you find at the University of California that you don't find at the CSUs in terms of the attraction that's there. I also know that a lot of the salaries, but it's not evident in the material that we get, is often driven by grants that people get as well. So, we're not seeing the full picture, and when you don't see the full picture and then you feel a sense of frustration and you feel the resistance by the administration to share the full picture, then people are left to draw their own picture. And I think that's what we're getting at this point from the legislature, a sense of frustration, a lack of what we consider sometimes cooperation by the University of California to provide everyone with the information that's there, and to try to develop some sense of interaction or control that we might have with the University of California concerning what it needs to do in terms of being more of a player and a partner in the challenges that we face in the state. So, there's a tremendous gap in salaries. We haven't addressed the issue of coaches and all the salaries that they make for failing teams that never win a tournament anywhere and never appear on TV either. And so, and yet, they get $2 million to coach a team that, that most of us wouldn't go see. So the question then becomes, what are the kinds of things that we're putting our resources into? And I realize that that's all a part of some other fund that some people have that's there, and so it's a moving target when you start talking about it. But I think it is a conversation that we have to have as in terms of that. But I think the bigger conversation is, what role does the legislature play in all of this, and what role do we play in setting salaries or caps or whatever there may be, or some panel or somebody who participates in developing these packets of salary offers and benefits and so forth and so on. I mean, who does that, and how is it done in isolation? So what level of control is on that? And that's an ongoing challenge that's there. It's not only for us, but I think it's for all of the universities when you see the salaries being paid across the country for faculty and others, as particularly normally those that are not in the classroom but out of the classroom, who are making the greater salary versus those who are in the classroom. So it's a challenge. I'm going to support it because I want the conversation to continue. May not support it when it gets to the floor because I want to see what we do in amendments and making sure that those that we're talking about money that's coming out of the state fund and not other kinds of things that are grants and so forth and so on that drive it, as well as hospitals and payments and individuals and those kinds of things that complicate this discussion of salary in terms of what people are being paid in the state of California. But I think it's a conversation we need to have, and sometimes we pass things along from one group to the next in order to keep the conversation going rather than to cut the conversation off.
Mr. Chavez.
Well, I think it's important that we have a conversation, but I think it's also there needs to be a recognition of the true role that the UCs have. as far as the funding that we have to them, it's a very small percent of their total operational budget. But the return on investment that UC has to a region as far as entrepreneurship, clustering of new technology, impact upon the whole region is significant, much more than we're talking about here. So I'm also troubled with the fact that we're pointing a lot of fingers at a lot of different groups. And I think what we need to have is a quiet, mature discussion on the role that we see the UCs within our society, and ask them, how they really add value to the community, the kids, and everything. So I don't think this bill does this. What this bill does is actually brings a negotiation mentality into the discussion of education, and I think that needs to be somewhere else. I think it needs to be done between the leadership, like at regents level, and the governor and leadership from the assembly. But it needs to be a quiet discussion with the larger view and where we need to go. And I don't think this does it at all. It's too pointed. So I will not be supporting this bill for that reason, because I think at this time we need to have the state would be better served with a quiet, mature discussion on this instead of a pointed one, strictly looking at how much somebody is being compensated for a particular job.
Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Well, I want to thank my colleagues for this discussion. And as chair of higher ed, I think this has been one of the best discussions that I've been involved in on it's kind of like the elephant in the room, and that elephant in the room is what are we going to do? And what are we going to do at the end of the day, and how we're going to get there? And, I again reiterate that I, as chair of higher ed, want to echo the former chair, Doss Williams, and that is that UC and CSU, community colleges, can't do the task that we give them without the funding from the state of California. One book that I recommend to all is The Unmaking of the Public University by English professor at UC Santa Barbara, forget his name, and just stating how in the state of California we have funded less and less our higher education. And as I spoke to faculty of CSU this afternoon, and as I tour different campuses, whether it's Cal State Sacramento or I go to the UC Riverside campus and I see at Sac State the very poor lab, that I would be ashamed to have at my high school, lab that's holding back students from taking classes, as I see paint cracked and chipping at the UC Riverside campus. We can't go on that way. So I understand the frustration, that we feel as legislators that's been expressed here. Some of the frustration, I think, that brings this bill forward. But at the same time, the bigger picture, I think, is and I think that's what the discussion has been about here this afternoon. The bigger picture is how do we support public institutions that have, historically been premier institutions in this nation, and how do we do that? And we only do that, I think, working together and being open and being transparent and having these kinds of discussions. So I, for that, thank the member. I want to keep ask the author if you get your commitment to make that amendment as we move forward. And that was the point brought by Ms. Baker.
My commitment to Ms. Baker, my comment to my response to Ms. Baker was that I'm happy to sit down with the stakeholders, happy to sit down with the University of California system. I'd love to get their proposal and suggestion as to how we develop an amendment, but we have to have a conversation about that. They need to come to the table as well. They can't just be, Roger Hernandez is going to be capitulating. Here I am as a representative of the public, as all of you are, and they're giving up nothing. They need to talk to the representatives of the public, and that's not happening. It's not happening in our asks by the budget committees. It's not happening with my office in making the request for this information, and it needs to happen. So if I can just go into the close whenever you give me permission, I'd like to close and respond to some of the comments that have been made.
May close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I wouldn't be here without my UC education. It is the best couple years of my life. Honored that I had the opportunity to attend a UC school. And I'll never...
If I may ask, which UC was that?
University of California, Riverside. And so, proud Highlander, proud Highlander. What I want, and I think what all of us here in this room want, is that there are more opportunities for students like myself to attend the University of California system, not less. We want to broaden that bridge, not widen and narrow that bridge of access. And so I've never said that this bill was going to be the save-all. I never said that this bill was going to solve the issues with future tuition increases. I never said that. Some people have characterized, have spoken on my bill that this bill won't do that. Never said the bill would. I said that this bill will help find a savings of $80 million today. And we're trying to come up. AFSCME, my office, is trying to come up with some solutions as to how we can start saving and how we would recommend that these $80 million in savings would go towards, and that is slowing the tuition increases. And given the opportunity, we'll come up with other proposals. But we have some well-read legislators here that have also done their research and have seen what is rising, what is causing the rise of cost for our university system here. And administration tends to be the center point at the core. And as lawmakers with a charge to not just legislate and propose, but also police and hold accountable, we have to ask these questions. Where are these dollars going, and why, in a time of austerity, Mr. Williams pointed out that we made billions of dollars of cuts, $26 billion. I know full well because I was helping to whip those votes as a majority whip in the California legislature. $26 billion in my first term we cut here. I get that, but in that same period of time, when we cut $26 billion to the people of California, where everybody was asked to share in the pain, it's embarrassing to know that the University of California system was increasing every single year the pay of their administrators. So where is the sharing in the pain there? They acted as if they were immune to the pains and the hurts of the people of California. That's not right. So this bill is also about transparency, making sure we know as the people of this state, students, their families, the people that have elected us to come here to do their work, that we know where every dollar is going and how these salaries, individual salaries, are being paid. There's been a characterization of confrontational legislation. This is not confrontational. This is about being responsive to these families of these students that are getting the letters. They're saying, we don't have a seat for you anymore. So as their representatives, we need to respond. And we need to hold, as this Constitution allows us to do, we need to hold this institution accountable. We need to be responsible so that we can restore the greatness to this institution. They do have a problem with the people of this state. Responsiveness. Mr. Williams suggested that we don't give lots of money to the California legislature does not appropriate lots of money. Yes, we do. It's in the billions of dollars to higher education, in the billions of dollars. I would ask anybody to tell me that that's not real money. That's real money. It's significant. Between student tuition fees and the appropriation out of our general funds, we are the biggest funder of the University of California system. We are the biggest funder. What one other individual provides more than between student tuition and the appropriations? And here today, the representative of the University of California system is smirking as I say this.
Well, only because that's...
I'm sorry, I have the floor?
Sorry.
I have the floor, don't I? Okay, please, don't interrupt.
I apologize.
So, at the end of the day, this is about accountability, and it's clear that we only have one opponent to this bill. The administrators at the University of California system, and they've sent you. That's the only opponent, not the people of California. I don't see one Californian here on behalf of taxpayers complaining about this piece of legislation. I don't see one employee here making $40,000 average income here complaining about this piece of legislation. So as we move forward, Mr. Williams talked about reappropriating or restoring funding. I want to close here. As we restore funding, we haven't fully restored to the K-12 system. That's not true. We haven't fully restored to higher education. But as we move down that path, we need to make sure that these dollars are spent responsibly and respectfully with a student-centered focus. I'd like to know if that's the case. We don't know that for sure because this institution is difficult with the information. So this bill is about accountability and it's about leadership. I appreciate the words of Dr. Weber. This legislature sustained a 22% cut in pay. Some people said it was unlawful. Some people said it was lawful. This legislature took it and we accepted it. We knew it was the right thing to do because we knew that we were making cuts in the billions of dollars. School districts saw cuts to 25 to 30% of their budgets. Children and families were hurting. And we knew if we were leaders as public servants that we needed to share in that pain. This piece of legislation here today is asking that the University of California be open, be responsible, and as leaders, share in the pain as well. I thank you and ask for your vote.
Before I call for a motion, I will respond. I just want to respond. And that is, if we do not have people at the microphone standing behind UC, I think that we do, the members here, the members here, we as the representatives of the people stand behind UC.
Yes, we do.
And I'm going to, I will recommend a yes vote, and I will vote yes on this bill, but with the same caveat that I've heard here from other members, that I have apprehension about arbitrary number, just a figure, that I have reservations of that, and I will recommend and vote yes on this bill, but reserving my own vote as it moves forward. And reiterate that we, the representatives of the people of the state of California, believe in the educational system that we have in place, and that it is our responsibility to make sure that it works for the good of all of us, and that if we have a weaker system, it is to the detriment of all the people of California. And so I want to say that because, one, I'm not giving Mr. Juarez a chance to respond, and other, because we are, the higher ed committee who believes in higher education. And with that, do I have a motion?
I'll move the bill. Second.
First by Mr. Harper, second by Mr. Joyce Sawyer. Madam Chair, Secretary, if you'd call the roll.
Medina?
Aye.
Medina, aye. Baker?
No.
Baker, no. Bloom?
No.
Bloom, no. Chavez?
No.
Chavez, no. Harper?
Aye.
Harper, aye. Irwin?
Aye.
Irwin, aye. Jones Sawyer?
Aye.
Jones Sawyer, aye. Levine?
Aye.
Levine, aye. Linder?
Aye.
Linder, aye. Lowe?
Aye.
Lowe, aye. Santiago?
Aye.
Santiago, aye. Weber?
Aye.
Weber, aye. Williams? 9-3.
9-3, your bill moves out of committee. The motion was due pass to appropriations, and we'll leave it open for members who add on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. Appreciate your time.
We'll move to item 9, Mr. Wilk. Say quick.